Ambassador, welcome back to Radio Free Europe.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I will start with the latest. Why isn't it a good time to open the bridge in Mitrovici, something that both Kosovo and Serbia agreed in Brussels?
I'm really glad you asked that question because this is an issue that I think has been misunderstood. The United States believes strongly that this is not the time to reopen the bridge to vehicle traffic. Let me make one point clear. We do believe that ultimately it should be open to vehicle traffic, and this was, as you said, part of the EU-facilitated dialogue, and agreement has been reached. But we've asked the government to not proceed at this time, and not just the United States. My Quint colleagues joined me in a conversation with the Prime Minister on this. And the reason why is because we believe there's real risk associated with taking this action right now, and we believe this risk increases the threat, potential violence, other problems, both for the local community but also for NATO soldiers, including American soldiers who are working to provide peace and security in Kosovo. And we take very seriously actions that could affect the safety and security of American soldiers working to support Kosovo. So our request to the government, and we've been having this conversation for a couple of months, has been please not take this action now, work with us. We want to help create the conditions where this could happen, but we do not believe the time is now.
But who may cause the violence?
I can't speak to who might cause the violence. I just know that we have an assessment that there could be violence and that it is real. And the question of who might be responsible for it, which is a very valid one, doesn't negate the fact that there could be violence and real risk to both the local communities and to NATO soldiers. And the United States is not interested right now in U.S. soldiers incurring additional risk on this issue.
Reacting to the closure of post office of Serbia, you said that Kosovo's uncoordinated actions put Kosovo citizens and KFOR soldiers at risk. In this very case, we know that KFOR has a fixed presence at the bridge, and KFOR was also of an opinion that this issue should be taken to Brussels dialogue. Can this at some point confront KFOR with Kosovo authorities?
I can't speak to how Kosovo would respond to a situation like this. I can say that KFOR has been quite clear that it takes this issue seriously as well. KFOR shares the same assessment of risk that the United States has and that we have shared with Kosovo authorities, that opening the bridge to vehicle traffic right now will increase the risk to soldiers. And that is why KFOR has also been very, very clear about its view that this should only be done in a way that mitigates that risk. And we don't believe the current planning takes into account that risk.
Can KFOR refuse to move away from bridge?
That is for KFOR to decide. KFOR has made a number of public statements that it is ready to fulfill its duties to both ensure a safe and secure environment and promote freedom of movement in the country. But it has made its statements making clear that it will respond to any threat that would increase instability in the region.
Despite this position of the US, Quint, and NATO, Prime Minister Kurti insists that the bridge has to open and that it is not against anyone. These days, we have also seen works on the bridge, tests, discussion with the locals, although very few Serbs attended it. So it seems that Prime Minister Kurti is going with his plan, the one that he presented at the meeting a couple of days ago.
I can't speak to the government's intentions. I do know the Prime Minister has told me that he wants to do things in coordination with the international community, something he said publicly. The international community's message to the Prime Minister has been extraordinarily clear, that right now, at this moment in time, we do not support a change in the status of the bridge. And the reason we don't support it is because we believe there's possibility for increased tensions and violence, which increases the risk for soldiers and for the local communities, including American soldiers. That's been our conversation. Our hope, our requests have been heartfelt, humble, but clear that the government will take into account requests from the United States about something that we believe directly affects the security of our soldiers and NATO soldiers working in Kosovo. Our hope is that the government will listen to that and take into account those concerns.
And if it doesn't, what would be the US's reaction?
I don't get into hypotheticals. Kosovo says it is our partner and friend. Kosovo tells us it's the most pro-American country in the world. So I would hope the most pro-American country in the world will listen to specific requests from the United States government not to put at risk NATO, including American soldiers.
But right after that meeting with Quint, Prime Minister came with a press release in the cabinet saying that the bridge has to be open. And then we've seen all these works on the bridge, so they have moved on with their plan.
I can only say this. We also made statements after that meeting laying out our view as well, which is, again, we are concerned about this action at this time. Again, long term, the United States agrees, and I think our European partners agree, that the bridge should be open to vehicular traffic. This is an agreement reached in the dialogue. The question is how and under what circumstances, and we don't believe the conditions are right now. And the reason we don't believe the conditions are right now is because of our assessment that we've shared consistently with Kosovo authorities that this increases the risk and threat to both local communities and to NATO soldiers, including American soldiers.
Why is this bridge such a big deal when we know that there are other bridges just a few meters away open for both pedestrians and traffic?
I think you'd have to ask the government of Kosovo that. I don't have a good answer to that question.
Okay. Are you still considering Prime Minister Kurti as a partner? Is he considering you as a partner?
I can't speak for how he considers us. I could just say that from the United States government's perspective, we have been challenged by the Prime Minister and his government in certain ways. There are some ways in which we have good and close partnership. We've done some important things together in advancing Kosovo's economy and trying to help create an economic system that delivers greater prosperity to citizens. We've made real progress with the authorities of the Kosovan state in helping fairly new institutions of government be more effective at that work and deliver better services to citizens, in particular in the area of the rule of law. But on these issues, I have to say we've been challenged by the Prime Minister and by his government. And I have to say that the quality of our partnership is not what we would hope it would be on some of these issues associated with how he handles the North and how he handles the dialogue. This isn't just me. An Undersecretary of State was here not too long ago and talked about the need and our hope for better coordination and cooperation. Our Assistant Secretary for Europe, Jim O'Brien, has talked about this publicly. We had the extraordinary moment, and I'm going to take the time to read a little bit of it, just last week after the uncoordinated actions against the post offices in the North, where the Department of State spokesperson had this to say: "We are concerned by the continuing uncoordinated decisions by the leadership of Kosovo. We believe they put at risk the opportunities that we have helped Kosovo create. If you look at the story since Kosovo's independence, the United States has strongly supported its full integration into the international community as a sovereign multi-ethnic democracy. But to realize this vision, which is a vision that we share, we have cooperated with successive Kosovo political leaders on measures that enhance peace and prosperity at home while advancing Kosovo on this Euro-Atlantic path. What we would ask this government of Kosovo to do is to return," which suggests we're not there right now, "to close and constructive engagement with the United States, with the EU, with NATO, and with Kosovo's other international partners."
How long are you going to wait for Kosovo to return? How long are you going to, let me say, tolerate to be challenged?
You know, I mean, Kosovo is a sovereign state, and we acknowledge it as such. So I don't know if it's a question of toleration. I think it's more a question of the quality of our partnership. We have questions about how committed this government is to partnership with us. When we talk to a government about things they could do that increase risk to our soldiers and we aren't convinced we're getting an effective response, it affects our view of to what extent this government is taking into account our concerns, to what extent this government is committed to the partnership we want to have.
Are you considering any consequences?
Well, I worry about where this is headed. I mean, long term, the United States wants to see, and the people of Kosovo want to see, Kosovo advance into European and Euro-Atlantic structures. We want to see Kosovo in the Council of Europe. We want to see Kosovo in the EU. We want to see Kosovo in NATO. The path to achieve that is to work cooperatively with us, with our European partners, with the leaders of the EU, with the leaders of NATO. So as an example, just last week with this uncoordinated action against the post offices, you saw the EU, you saw NATO, you saw the United States, you saw Germany, you saw France, you saw the United Kingdom, you saw Italy, all raise concerns. I worry that these types of actions reduce the appetite and reduce the not the commitment, but the enthusiasm for supporting Kosovo on these paths. Kosovo already lost an important opportunity to obtain Council of Europe membership by not being responsive to requests from our European partners who get to make this choice of the conditions that they expected Kosovo to meet to join the Council of Europe. I worry very much that Kosovo's path to the European Union, its request, its current application for accession status, effective and complete implementation of the Stabilization and Association Agreement, which is to Kosovo's benefit strongly, I worry that this is going to be negatively affected. My German colleague last week already talked about how the accession path itself could be kept in the inbox or put on ice. The EU's talking about additional measures. I hope very much that there aren't additional measures, but that, to a large extent, depends on the government of Kosovo. and the extent to which it stops these types of actions that we've consistently warned against and starts acting in partnership with us and with our European partners the way we have consistently asked it to do. We agree this is hard. We agree that there are difficult things on the agenda, but we also think we have a system and a process to help advance Kosovo, but it does require this cooperation.
Is the United States currently lobbying for Kosovo's membership to different organizations, or is that on pause?
I have not seen a lot of enthusiasm in support of this government's efforts right now for new memberships in international organizations. We made real efforts on the Council of Europe, but then Kosovo was unwilling to take the step that its European partners, and we also asked it to do, which was to move the draft statute on the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities to the Constitutional Court for a review of its constitutionality.
That hasn't happened yet.
That hasn't happened yet, and the fact that that didn't happen, I have to say, removes some of the enthusiasm in the United States government to keep trying to make this effort when Kosovo won't take even this, from our perspective, fairly minimal and early step in this process.
What happens if it doesn't take it to the Constitutional Court? Well,
I mean, that's a choice for the government of Kosovo, but it will mean that I think a lot of these processes are likely to stall. There's a realpolitik point to this. If you want to join NATO, if you want to join the European Union, if you want to join the Council of Europe, you have to have the support of the countries that are already there. And we have the challenge of certain countries in those institutions that don't recognize Kosovo the way we do as a sovereign independent state. And they've made clear that part of their support will depend on progress in the dialogue, wanting to see Kosovo and Serbia reposition their relationship. From our perspective, the government of Kosovo has not engaged constructively in the dialogue in certain ways. Now, I could say the same thing about Serbia as well. We've talked about the need for both countries to do a much better job of fulfilling all their obligations, but since I do Kosovo for a living, and because I personally and my government institutionally so much wants to see Kosovo advance on this path and claim its place in European structures, we hope to see this government, rather than trying to take actions that make it harder for us to be effective advocates, give us good arguments in favor of Kosovo's accession. That has not been happening.
Not yet. Going back to the actions of the government in the north, the international community over the past 2 years has reacted numerous of times over the actions Kosovo government undertook. However, the government says that they have succeeded in establishing rule and order. Do you believe that there is more rule and order in the north than it used to be 2 or 3 years ago?
I would say the situation in the north is different in some ways than it was 2 or 3 years ago. But I think if you're going to integrate an area, you integrate both the area and its people. And what I've seen lately is a lack of integration of the population of the north and absolute incomplete efforts to attract them, to encourage them, to include them. Let's just take the issue of the bridge again. Very few people showed up. Those who did, who were residents of the north, as I understand it, were largely not in favor of opening the bridge to vehicular traffic.
And talked about other issues they're facing, not the bridge.
Exactly, and they're very concerned. So our hope would be that this government, which absolutely gives the right points about being a government for all citizens of Kosovo, acts in accordance with that and finds ways to show the people that they also need to be integrated into Kosovo, that there are real benefits and that this government is responsive to their concerns. I haven't met many representatives of the ethnic Serb community right now who believe the Kurti government is making successful efforts to show sensitivity to and concerns about the issues on the minds of the ethnic Serb community in Kosovo.
You mentioned that you have been challenged by this government, but then yesterday we saw in media reporting that Prime Minister Kurti may take place next week at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Can you confirm this?
It is my understanding that Prime Minister Kurti plans to attend the Democratic National Convention at the invitation of the National Democratic Institute. But to be clear, this is not an invitation from the United States government. The Democratic Party is a political party in the United States. NDI is the Democratic Party's arm that works in building parties and democratic institutions abroad. So the invitation came from NDI to the Prime Minister, I believe in his capacity as the president of one of Kosovo's parties, just like NDI invited presidents of other parties of Kosovo as well. But this is not a U.S. government invitation.
Okay. Last, I would like to ask you a bit on Banjska. We are approaching the first anniversary on Banjska. its head, Milan Radojic, is still free, presumably in Serbia. How much longer will the United States wait for Serbia to arrest Radojic and face charges?
Well, I think the United States has been quite clear about our expectation that all those who were involved in that horrific crime are held accountable. We've said so publicly, and of course part of our diplomacy with Serbia has been as well our expectations that Mr. Radojic and other perpetrators of this criminal act are held accountable. That continues to be part of our conversation, and we hope to see that happen soon. I would note that there is a way that Kosovo can help from my perspective. My understanding that Serbian officials have talked about that they have now sent a formal request through the official channel for mutual legal assistance, that evidence they would need to prosecute Mr. Radojic, which Kosovan authorities have, would be provided to them. And again, on a political basis, I would hope that the government of Kosovo would be responsive to that request, because you would want to ensure that a prosecution happens and that Mr. Radojic is held accountable for his criminal act, as well as all the other people involved.
Are there any results from the investigation? Former DES Escobar mentioned that there may have been links to financial and organizational links of the attack to the state of Serbia?
I don't have more to say on that.
All right. And do you think that lack of accountability on Banska fits the narrative that the West is appeasing Serbia through a softer stance due to geopolitical interests, such as having Serbia more aboard, ensuring Serbia in Brussels, to be in Brussels than in Moscow?
You know, I think the United States has been quite clear that we expect Kosovo and Serbia both to live up to certain standards. And I think we've been, I mean, again, I do Kosovo for a living, so all I can say is I believe the U.S. Embassy in Belgrade is quite engaged in trying to ensure that Serbia does the things that Serbia has committed itself to do, and that includes holding Mr. Radojic and other perpetrators of a crime accountable for that crime. It also includes Serbia living up to and fulfilling all of its obligations that it's entered into in the dialogue, just as we are doing here.
Ambassador, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you.